Hello, everyone. First of all, yes, my name is Wojtek, and yes, this is my real name, just to get it out of the way. Feel free to pronounce it however you like. We don't have the time for pronunciations. Anyway, I currently work on product design at Nord, and I worked on a few other things before that. And all of this work led me to a single depressing realization. Ideas do not matter. And this little car proves it. And I know it sounds really stupid. What do you mean ideas don't matter? Design is all about coming up with creative ways to solve problems. OK, so I have a short little story that will maybe convince you. These days, the country I'm from, Poland, is doing pretty well economically speaking, but in the 70s, it was one of the poorest places in Europe. People were barely scraping by, huge bread lines, empty store shelves, just generally not fun. And to quantify this, 90% of people wanted to buy a car, but only 2% could actually afford one. The government had a conundrum. They needed to introduce a car that people could maybe afford. And so they introduced this. This is the Fiat 126p, and it's absolute garbage, even by 70s standards. It had a small engine, it was cramped and slow, it was ugly, and all of the awfulness was actually an issue of political stability. Think about it. People coveted a car, and the only one available was so bad that it kind of symbolized the awful living conditions. It's easy to assume that this story ends in a disaster, but you would be wrong, because today the Fiat isn't just some remnant of a horrible past, but a bona fide national symbol. There's a city tour in Warsaw you can take in one, a keychain, a commemorative coin, an actual video game, and it's kind of terrible, by the way. Here's a photo of me with one as a kid, a miniature model, and a few other things. The Iron Curtain fell, but the Fiat remained popular. So how is it possible that something so terrible on paper, keep in mind, most people still couldn't afford the car, how did something so terrible become not just accepted, but actually beloved? The answer is communication. Sure, the Fiat was a terrible car, but promotional campaigns reframed it under one incredibly important and distinct aspect. It was small, compact, and thus it was practical and perfectly suited for everyday city life. Communication completely reframed a conventionally terrible idea. You might have never heard about the Fiat or much about Poland or never designed anything that could cause a crisis, despite what user feedback probably makes you think. But I believe that this story should still be relatable. Why? Well, let me just ask you. I would like to hear that from you. Raise your hand if you ever pitched or presented a design concept during a company meeting or maybe during a job interview or in any context, really. All right, nearly everyone raised their hand because it's pretty obvious that this is a fact of life. Designers need to present their stuff. It's just a part of our daily responsibilities. But let me ask you now, if you ever attended a design pitch or a design presentation of any kind, but you didn't actually pay attention to the person speaking, and instead you just worked on something else, you messaged people, you browsed social media. OK. I'm not afraid to admit it, and I see that pretty much everyone here isn't either. And I think it's pretty safe to say that everyone does it. I won't snitch on you, by the way, but because I think that everyone, at the end of the day, thinks that when we present, we look like this. We are enlightening the audience with the brilliance of our idea. But it's pretty clear that reality is probably more like this. Design should be about fun, creative stuff, but more often than not, it's just about boring internal company politics. While a great idea is important, in a corporate environment, it's not the quality or the research or the visuals that decide whether the idea will see the light of the day. It's just how we sell it to key stakeholders or even just fellow team members. And it's a challenge, because attention is a commodity. There's only so much attention our brains are willing to give to anything when you've got infinite other things to worry about. We have an attention cap of 20 minutes. And as I'm giving this talk right now, I fully realize that I need to make every second of it more engaging than the pocket distractor you all have. And that is the exact same problem you need to solve when you pitch designs. And with design, I believe there's two very unique problems to focus on. First, design is complex. It requires a lot of brain juice to comprehend a design concept. It's a lot of mental work no one wants to do. Second, and I don't know how to say it, but design is just really boring. I'm sorry to say this, but it's just this. It's slow, methodical, and yes, you guessed it right, I'm a little burned out, but it's just rectangles on screen. It's not exactly an exhilarating drama, it's rectangles on screen. It doesn't give you that rush of dopamine. A successful design pitch needs to understand and address these issues. So, first of all, why is design difficult to comprehend? So cognitive science says that the way we think about problems and the way we talk about them are incompatible. Our brains think in hierarchies. When we have a product solution in mind, it's not exactly an orderly essay. It's a creative and layered, messy web of random interlinked concepts. Our idea, as it exists in our heads, is multi-dimensional. Speech, on the other hand, is always one-dimensional. It's a stream of words, one after another. Here lies the disconnect. How do you structure a pitch of something that is inherently complex with a tool, your language, which is just unfit for the job? Your pitch needs a structure. I don't mean like a bullet point list or some table. I mean an overall arc, a narrative that translates the multi-dimensional into one-dimensional. A through line. A term typically used for movies or books, but I think we can apply it to presentations as well. It's a thread which connects each part of your presentation into one cohesive narrative. It doesn't mean you must stick to a single topic. It just means that all the detours you do take have to connect back to that single unifying theme. For this talk, while I had a lot of kind of random ideas, they all connect to a through line. Make designs clear and interesting in your pitch. Then I translated that into the script, and I cut out anything that just didn't fit, although it really hurt a lot. All right, before we move on to actual design examples of this in practice, a quick word from today's talk sponsor, NordVPN. OK, I'm just kidding. It's actually Nordpass. Nordpass is Nord's flagship password manager, and by pure coincidence, I actually work on it. It's pretty straightforward. You enter a password, it gets saved, you can reuse it later on any device. There's way more features, storing personal info, financial information, passkeys, secure notes. And there's an entire personal cybersecurity suite to keep yourself safe online. This is Nerpass Homeview, and it's deliberately simple. There's a navigation on the left and a list of items in the middle. If you want to move your passwords or any other type of information from another password manager, you can actually do that using the import feature, which is currently hidden deep in the settings. While the feature is fantastic, the visibility of it just sucks, and it's no wonder we are struggling with retention because of it. However, what if we wanted to make every new Nordpass user a regular Nordpass user immediately after sign-up? What if we took the import functionality out of the settings into the home view and turned it into a drag-and-drop field? And that way, more new users will see the import feature immediately and immediately know what to do. Why will it succeed? Well, simply put, 100% of our users, including any new one, see the home view after sign-up. But 3 months after that initial exposure, only 12% of those users remain. However, if we take a look at users who do perform import, that number jumps back to 40%. So there is strong correlation between import and retention. And user research reveals why that is, and it's kind of obvious. People don't know import exists. Manually adding existing data to Nordpass is just a chore. No one's actually willing to do that and give the app a try because it's such a huge ask. But if you clearly tell people and show them, you can just actually move over your existing stuff into your Nordpass account, well, they are a bit more willing to give the app a try, or in the best case scenario, call it the best thing since Control-C, Control-V. Right, so what I did now is I pitched you a potential idea for Nerpass. Just to be clear, it's not something we are actually planning. It's purely hypothetical, including all of the data and research, but it's based on reality. Let's take a look at the structure. You will quickly see there's a lot of concepts I had in mind for this. Data, user feedback, product context, and so on. But it's not random. It all connects to a through line. Making new users regular users. I didn't, for example, discuss interaction design, like how simple a drag-and-drop field is, because, one, we don't have the time, and two, it would just feel a little bit out of place. But if I were to choose improving the UX as my through line, I would absolutely cover more topics related to UX and UI aspects in slides and on the script. I consider the through line to be fundamental for the overarching macro level of any presentation, actually including this talk. But now, let's take a look at the micro level and focus on how to structure an individual point or an individual argument within a slide or a series of slides. To do this, let's go back to this slide. And let's take a look at the script. So first, I focus on the problem. The visibility of import sucks, and we are struggling with user retention. Second, the solution. We'd like to introduce a drag-and-drop field into the home view. Lastly, the benefit. This will work well because every single new user sees the home view after sign-up. This is what I call the problem, solution, benefit argument structure, and it's an example of a TLA structure. WTF does this stand for? OK, so it's actually three-letter acronyms. Simply put, it's a multi-step structure with a distinct beginning, middle, and end. And it's an acronym, so it's easy to remember and rely on, especially when speaking spontaneously. And especially there when, like me, you're not a native English speaker, you make a lot of grammar mistakes, you really need to think about how to even structure a sentence. In other words, I'm a little dumber in English than in Polish. What we just went through as a PSB structure. And it's handy when you want to explain things in a logical manner while focusing on an issue and its background. But a different TLA structure, like story, insight, action, SIA, could be more personal and appeal to emotions. I would, for example, recall the story of how I initially didn't even know that import exists, despite designing the app. But the structure can really be anything, because the idea is here for you to basically create your own TLAs, your own acronyms, which fit your presentation style. You don't have to, and you shouldn't mention them explicitly. I mean, we just went through EEE, an example of what a TLA is, an explanation of what it is, and how to execute it in practice. And all of this is actually a part of a bigger explanation where we went through the problem, the solution, and you should know by now, the benefits. The brain is tuned to comprehend stories and gist of things better than complex detail. Structures like the TLA or like the through line follow this principle, so they are easier for the audience to follow. But they also make things easier for you, because they give you guidance on what to include in your presentation. This talk had a lot of random ideas, some car from the 70s, cognitive science, and Nerpass. But structures allowed me to connect these frankly random things to support one takeaway. Structures make designs clear. But even an intuitive presentation can still be boring, and boring things repel attention. A pitch has to create intrigue. Conventionally, impressive details such as data or research should make your pitch stand out, but surprisingly, the opposite is actually true. When encountering new concepts, we don't use the most advanced parts of our brain, which evolved for complex analysis. We use the most primitive parts of our brain, which evolved to keep us safe by reacting quickly without any analysis. So when presented with complex details, the brain literally turns off because it's literally being bored to death. Otherwise, a pitch could take hours, but we only have seconds to pique that initial interest. So a clear structure needs to be spiced up, starting literally with a hook. It's a simple opening statement which encapsulates the main takeaway of your pitch. It's not just a summary. It's a novel and subversive framing of your big idea. For example, earlier in my pitch, I didn't start out by listing data or technical details, and I said, What if every new Nerpass user became a regular Nerpass user immediately after sign-up? This statement is obviously impossible, but that's not really the point. The point is to, 1, amplify the main benefit of my idea, and 2, create intrigue out of something ordinary. I could have said, here's how we can redesign import, but that wouldn't really sound that exciting. I mean, even this talk, I started out by saying, ideas don't matter, and this little car proves it, which sounds mental, but then again, it's the hook. It's meant to capture your attention by introducing the main topic of the talk in an unorthodox way. But why bring up some random car at all? Wouldn't it be better to just jump right into the actual meat and potatoes of the talk? Well, maybe. This story might seem pointless. It's only loosely connected to the theme of the talk. But I would say that it kind of is easier to grasp than, say, neuroscience behind communication. Not only a simple story does have a much lower barrier to entry, it actually kind of illustrates the point better than any quote-unquote impressive data ever could, and that's the power of storytelling. Translating the abstract and complex into something simple, into something more human, more relatable, and importantly for tackling boredom, interesting to listen to. I'm certain most talks here on config will probably have some parable in the middle, specifically because of this exact reason. Once you notice it, you can't go back, but when it comes to design, it's rectangles on screen. What kind of stories can we have about that? OK, so for example, when I worked on a yet unannounced feature, the problem we run into is that each country has a different format for their ID cards. Norway mentions height, in the EU, most member states don't, and the US, there is no federally issued actual ID card. I didn't just want to mention this problem. It was one of the main issues of the project. I really wanted to accentuate it. And to do this, I used this wiki article. In Ireland, there was a person called Wojtek Dziedzic who was declared the worst traffic violator after racking up over 50 traffic violations from all over the country. The Irish police launched an investigation into this person, and this investigation revealed that this person is actually not even a person. Prawo jazdy is actually prawo jazdy, and it literally just translates to driver's license in Polish. OK, so what happened is that Ireland has a lot of Polish immigrants. So whenever one was pulled over and they handed their documents over for review, the police people couldn't actually read the documents, so they just assumed that those 2 words, they have to be a name, because Polish looks like gibberish. I mean, look at my name again, if you don't believe me. But eventually, because of silly stories like this, the EU adopted a single standardized format. The reason I'm bringing the story up is simply if an entire country can make such a huge blunder, so might we. But I realize that for most projects, there won't really be an oddly specific story to rely on. So what you can do instead, like I did in the pitch before, is use data, which by itself is pretty boring, but you can connect it to user feedback, an actual human aspect behind the numbers, and that will be more than enough to create some captivating narrative. And actually, user feedback is a treasure trove of stories you can just plug into your pitch. Some of my favorites from Nerd include this guy, who apparently enjoys the app, but still not so subtly tells me that I suck at my job. This person who is complaining about their wife, and they still give us 5 stars, which I'm not sure how to interpret, frankly. Or this person who's really passionate about a single specific aspect of one single specific feature, which feedback is feedback at the end of the day, I guess. I realized that these examples are a bit wacky, and I actually had funnier and more absurd ones, and even an entire section about how important humor is, but during rehearsals, it turned out I'm not that funny. So I cut it out. And to be honest, I cut like 80% of this talk. It's the unfortunate reality of making a slide deck. It's just knowing what to put on the slides. So for example, I forbid myself from using the classic bullet point list and title layout because I absolutely hate it. I get it, it's simple, but having 50 separate slides costs literally as much as having one slide. So just break each point down into an individual slide. And focus on the narration. I kept slides to absolute minimum, just a single word or a single visual. To go between different points, I used motion transitions a lot, because they're like visual candy for your brain. It's just something nice to look at as a yap some nonsense. And they also have the practical purpose of maintaining cohesion when I have a single point span across multiple slides. If you don't hate yourself, dissolving is good enough too. If I made a separate point, I just cut into it to visually signify that. And if I wanted to make a really separate point, I changed the visuals from light to dark. Whenever I had a UI design, I animated it to highlight something that was important for the narration. And that's actually why I would recommend Figma Slides. It's not because I was forced to on the backstage. It's just handy when you already have designs in Figma to have everything in one place. All of these, the hook, the data, the nice slides, the storytelling, are meant to make your pitch more engaging, more interesting, more dopamine-inducing, or at least a little bit less boring. But sometimes, I just leave my slides blank, so you can focus and look at me. Sorry for that. These methods work for me. I consider them good practices, and if you're on YouTube, you can actually just go back and try to catch them in real time. That's how we got the view count up, by the way. Each presentation is different, though. I don't adhere to these methods all the time, and I don't think it would make sense for anyone to just copy them either. I consider them more of a guideline, because actually the most interesting thing is authenticity. So what I think you should do is just try to find the best practices which work for you and which fit your presentation style, some of which I hope will be the things we discussed today, though. Thank you for listening, and good luck making your own slides in the future.